Hey guys, what's going on? It's Erik here, and welcome to another review. This time it's going to be a video game review, and as a lot of people have asked, and as you can clearly see based on the gameplay footage that you guys are seeing, this is going to be a review on Overwatch. Now, to kind of give a bit of clarification on this, Overwatch and I share a very close history with one another, particularly because it's not only like the game that I played the most out of now. I've put in approximately a year's, which equals to around 800 hours of game time into this game alone, give or take. It's also been my first competitive game that I played. It's also the first multiplayer game that I played that I interacted with my team. And it's also the game that introduced me to pretty much everybody who I consider my friend and who I actually am eternally grateful for. Even though it's probably going to be annoying to a lot of people. Well, but yeah, it's been around a year and a half since I played this game. I know a lot of you people wanted me to see, well, not see, they wanted me to review this game. They wanted me to give my honest opinion what I felt has been the good and bad of Overwatch, and today you guys are going to be able to see it. Before we start up with the review, as a bit of a heads up again, I have a Discord, so make sure you guys go and join it, so that way you guys can have sort of little updates on when I'm going to be streaming, of when I'm going to be reviewing games, and when the videos are uploaded, you know, that kind of stuff. And so, without further ado, let's jump into Overwatch competitive reviews, or as I just like to call it, Overwatch review. Starting off this review, we're going to be talking about the gameplay. Now, Overwatch is a multiplayer-based FPS that focuses on team builds and heroes. Now, each hero is divided into 4 classes: offense, defense, tank, and support. Now, to give sort of a general idea what I think of each class, I want to at least go down through each specific class, like I said. Now, offense is a more mobile and more attack-based team that consists of 8 different heroes, which you can see on screen. What's good about the hero class offense is that they can definitely help dish out a lot of damage towards the enemy team, particularly towards the tanks. However, a lot of the times, some of these characters could have very, very varied moments of cheesiness, particularly McCree. However, in terms of its usefulness, I feel like out of everybody in the hero class offense, the most they can offer any sort of like reliability is probably Reaper, Soldier, Pharah, and Sombra. Genji, Doomfist, McCree, and Tracer are they're not as reliable as you would think, but they can be very reliable if the player who picks them knows what they're doing. Because Doomfist is basically just a person who can one punch almost everything. Genji's a character who relies heavily on mobility, and he's the kind of character that you would not mess with if he's good. McCree as well, because he's the kind that can pick off so many different players and also uses High Noon to change the course of the story and the course of the game. And Tracer is a character that is very annoying, that could definitely be a hassle for your team if you're not trying to focus fire on her at all costs. Now, moving on to the next point, which is going to be defense heroes. Now, defense heroes are sort of the characters that you would use to change the course of a match, both either in offense or defense, particularly whenever a team is trying to advance towards the objective, which in this case could be the payload, point, the king of the hill point, like just the point of it being that it'll go straight to the objective. These characters, which are are very, very annoying to deal with. Particularly Bastion, Mei, Junkrat, and Torbjorn. They're the ones. Those four are the most annoying characters you can deal with, particularly because of how they're specified. Bastion is a robot that can transform between recon and turret mode at will, and can heal itself. So he could be a very big hassle if the team decides to protect them at all costs. Particularly the Mei. The Mei could combo with the Bastion by utilizing her freeze ability and giving the Bastion an advantage over the enemy. She can she is the definition of, oh my god, she's the most annoying character around the entire map, cuz she can legitimately freeze every single person. She can help the team in so many different ways that it's hard to believe that not a lot of people can play against her. Junkrat as well, due to the amount of buffs and changes they given to him, he is a formidable and also very annoying character to play because he relies heavily on RNG, particularly because a lot of the times the players don't really aim their shots. They're just banking on like random shots hitting in that stat. But he could be a massive tank buster, especially towards the shields. Torbjorn is a character that can also dish out a lot of damage, particularly with his molten core and his turrets. And his armor offers such good resistance against damage, and that the fact that he can continuously regenerate over and over again, it's very difficult if he manages to secure a position where you can't shoot at him without getting hit by the turret so many times. Now, Hanzo and Widowmaker are the snipers, and they're the ones that are big tricky to handle, because they could either help out a team by picking off each of their separate characters, or they could be completely useless because the players who are playing them just suck at it. No offense, but that's just how I've always seen it. In my opinion, the defense team is probably the most annoying class to go up against, and it's probably one of the better classes to use as, because they don't really require too much to learn them, but they still require you to at least have an idea how each of the heroes work, and you still need to be able to work with your team, because a lot of times if they're by themselves, it's really easy to take them out. Moving on to the tank class. Now, tank class is the class that I use the most in Overwatch, with them being very sturdy, very resistant, and they have a lot of health. Their point being to just stay on the objective and to take all the hits from the DPS, from the defense, pretty much what you can name it, and try to survive as long as possible and defend the team. With Reinhardt, Orisa, and Winston being the shield tanks because they have the shields. With Reinhardt being able to deploy his at will, Orisa's being able to use hers, which is in any sort of direction, and Winston being able to use his when he dives into the enemy team. Roadhog, D.Va, and Zarya are definitely heaven haters as well. Zarya is one of the most tricky characters to play in Overwatch due to the fact that you need to time your shields well, her barriers, which allow her to get charged from both defending herself and her teammates. So she's one of the trickiest characters to deal with and to play as, but she's also the most formidable tank out there because if she's high enough charge, she can destroy an entire team all by herself. D.Va, what she kind of lacks somewhat in DPS, she can make up for it with her sturdy resistance, her defense matrix, and her D.Va bomb, which is very useful in certain situations. Orisa is a character that has little mobility, but is a really tanky, but also somewhat weak tank. Her Fortify makes up for it, but it's very little amount of time that she gets with it. And the shield respawns like every 8 seconds or so, with her high point being her gravity attack, which allows her to just draw in everybody that it comes close in contact with. So she is a very heavy hitter, and the fact that her supercharger actually helps out the team pretty well makes her very good to use for attack and defense. Reinhardt is also a very good tank overall because his hammer has very high amount of damage and it has a great length, and his fire strike and his charge also helps out a lot because his charge can almost destroy a lot of the characters in the game. And the Fire Strike can hurt a lot of the characters. With Roadhog is also one of the characters that is the more trickier. Okay, not tricky, but he's one of the characters that you can easily defeat, but also have a hard time dealing with because his ability to heal himself and his ability to hook you make him really hard. But the problem being that his DPS, aka his shotgun, isn't as effective as it used to be. With the shotgun and hook combo being like one of the most formidable things to deal with and one of the more annoying things to deal with in comp and in Overwatch in general, having been nerfed, he can dish out a lot of damage. He can be a formidable opponent and just overall annoying if you leave him alone. Like, a lot of these tanks are really good. Their purpose fits well. They're able to do so much. With Winston being one of the harder characters to play as because his DPS is so low, but he can cause so much distractions. He can basically be the character that leads the charge and then helps out the team finish off the enemies. Like, the tanks are really good for holding their position and just doing what they can to survive. Alright, now moving on to the last class, which is support. The support class, which are basically the healers in this case, are the most important part of every team because they're the ones in charge of keeping the team alive by healing them through any means necessary. And they're also one of the weaker characters to deal with. Now granted, since this is support, the only character that cannot heal is Symmetra, which by many people's cases she should be a defense hero instead of a support. But the fact that she's able to use her shield generator, which allows us armor, actually helps out pretty well. The fact also being that every healer has their own specific amount of heals they can do. In terms of who's the best healer, in my opinion, it has to be Mercy. Because she can consistently heal you no matter what, and consistently damage boost you to the point where you're able to take down the enemy team. As long as you keep her safe, though, which, as most Overwatch players are, they don't really keep them safe. Like, the healers are probably one of the more underrated and they're the more underrated class because they're the ones that basically do all the thankless work with nobody even so much as saying, hey Mercy, I really appreciated what you did. Hey Lucio, hey Zenyatta, like, hey more. Like, they're the characters that you just aren't grateful for, but yet are willing to ask for their assistance when you need it. They're the characters that need the most appreciation because they're the ones who are trying to keep you all alive. At least in my opinion. In terms of their healing, Mercy's the best, with the second one being Ana. And Lucio, Zenyatta, and Moira kind of share like the similar stats because Moira, as a recent character that released, is one of those characters that just has difficulties because a lot of people, like, the problem being is like a lot of people expect the healers to be like DPS, which in my opinion is kind of dumb to expect that from the people who are trying to kill you. Because Zenyatta and Moira are considered DPS at this point because they are able to dish out so much damage towards the enemy teams. But at the same time, if they focus more on just damaging the team, they won't be able to heal their own team as well. This is entirely based upon my own opinion, remember. This is based on what I have had to see, what I had to play, like all the different things I've seen within this past year and a half of Overwatch. And in all honesty, like I said, the healers are definitely the best part of the game because they're a lot of fun to play, but the problem being that the teams just never want to really thank the healers for something that they are just forced to do because simply because nobody is willing to do it for them. At least that's what I believe for that case. One of the things that Overwatch puts a priority over than anything else is communication and teamwork. The point of the game is that you're supposed to work together with 5 other people to form your team, choose your characters, and then work together to just complete the objective and try to win. This applies to every mode, both quick play, comp, and arcade. Now, the issue I feel like Overwatch has that kind of lacks in that department is more so on the players. A lot of times, players don't communicate as much. I tend to run into a lot of games where people just aren't communicating. They aren't using their microphones. They aren't like trying to say, "Hey, group up with me," or "Join me," or "I need healing," or any of that, or like just not even saying anything, just staying silent. That also falls into me because I've done that personally a couple times before. The problem being is that in communication in Overwatch tends to either go so many different ways. It could go positively, which means like the team works together, we get the job done, we win, that kind of stuff. But it can also go in a more negative fashion with the team just not cooperating, a lot of the like DPS tanks or whatever just diving in by themselves, the healers just not healing or just pocketing a certain character, or the DPS or tanks just criticizing the healer, like that kind of stuff. A lot of the other issues being is like it tends to get more negative because of the person. Because there could be a lot of times when players just don't use their mics, and then when they do, it's only just to criticize another player for their bad performance. Like it tends to depend entirely on what the player does in game and what they're doing, but the lack of communication sometimes in Overwatch just ends up kind of screwing over the game quite a bit because and when I mean communication, I don't mean like as if we need to be talking in game, like we need to be conversing, doing calls, all of that. When I mean by communication, I just mean that we just need to at least try to like listen to one another in the sense like, hey, don't go like maybe group up. Hey, maybe let's use our ults. Like let's try to do something. Like try to come up with a plan, even if it doesn't mean that we have to use a microphone. Like that kind of communication. And it sometimes gets to the point where people then start being, I don't know, a dick, because a lot of times people believe that they're really good at the game when, in all honesty, they're about. If you queue up with a diamond player and he says that you suck, it also kind of means what they say about them, because with that kind of logic, it can be applied to them as well. Like I said, this isn't just my own opinion. This is just what I'm trying to state on my review. I understand that it might not be something that people really like to hear or what they're going to be understanding, but I'm just stating that this is just what I think, what I'm trying to say about the game. After almost 800 hours of playtime, it's just, this game is a lot of fun. But sometimes communication just does not work out well. And it ends up kind of like screwing us over because like the game, like I said, puts an emphasis on communication and teamwork. Like, but a lot of times due to players, or sometimes the game itself telling you what you should or shouldn't do, you kind of get the sense of like people just don't want to work together. They would rather do things on their own. And this also applies to me because I've also done this before. However, the way how I also see it is that communication should be necessary for this kind of game. Like this isn't a game like Call of Duty. This isn't like Destiny. This isn't like any of those games. This is the game that has to put a priority on communication purposely because you need to climb. In competitive, you're trying to raise the ranks with 5 other people. You're trying to win. You're trying to have fun. You're trying to work together. And so it kind of gets to the point where like you need to just at least try. What I think Overwatch should do is try to at least put more emphasis on teamwork. Like try to just basically say work together. Like I don't say they have to be in the voice chat or whatever. They just say actually listen to your team, and it's just don't be a dick when you're quote unquote doing everything in the game and you're just and your team sucks. Like don't do that. because it's just very, very difficult. And this is something I want to talk about in competitive, because this competitive is a very, very, very difficult thing to talk about. Now, competitive is the game mode that focuses on trying to climb through the ranks, trying to defeat your enemy team, and try to prove that you're one of the best players out there. There are 5 ranks: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and then there are the higher ranks, which are masters, grandmasters, and the top 500. Now, competitive is probably one of the more aggravating and probably the most enjoyable game mode of Overwatch, because, as I said, you're all trying to win. You're all trying to compete to become like the best player. You're trying to show people your skills. You're trying to like prove yourself. And this falls in line with what I've said before. This game puts an emphasis on communication and teamwork. However, in competitive, it's probably one of the more difficult things to do. Like, in a lot of occasions, our teams, the teams of both the enemy and ours, just don't really work. I'm just gonna say red team and blue team. Both teams, whenever they lack communication, they start to falter. And sometimes competitive is one of those modes where like it's more the player's fault for just not for trying to not really do anything, because the game mode in of itself isn't really a problem. It's more on the teammates in of themselves just not working together or just not doing their job right. And the problem being is like competitive is a place where these kinds of mistakes, like these kinds of things, just don't end up becoming like a thing that you can easily take care of. If you mess up with teamwork, or if you just mess up in general in this game, it could cost you the match. And the problem with competitive right now is like there's a lot of people who get quote and like part of my friends, they get very sensitive. Like if the game is not going the way that they want it to, there could be people who start to throw the game by just like not playing the characters that they want to play, and then just basically just not do their job. Or there could be the teammates that just leave the game because they started losing. Like it's both an annoyance for both the blue team and the red team, because you're both trying to win, and it's really unfair when a teammate starts to lead the game because it didn't go the way how they wanted it to, and then it ends up becoming an issue because these people just then don't care about it. Like they'll accept the loss of SR, they'll accept the punishment, which I feel like isn't really severe, because these are people who are just doing this because they're not happy with how the game treats them or how the players treat them. Like it's unfair because it then causes like both teams to suffer consequences. With the blue team or like the winning team end up getting less SR, with the losing team losing a lot of XR, especially the people who grew up with the person who leaves, because the person who leaves ends up causing something with the other teams. Because the SR in groups actually affects all of them. If a person froze, you'll end up losing the same amount of SR as they will. And it's kind of unfair because like the team who has one teammate missing shouldn't really be severely punished for this kind of thing. Like it's not completely their fault that it's not really their fault in that sense. I personally feel like competitive is probably, in my opinion, it's a really fun game mode, but both the players and how the rules are stacked sometimes kind of feel ridiculous. Because there are a lot of moments where like the game like doesn't register when you're on objective or when you're trying to win or whatever. The game would just like not registered and ends up causing like a massive state of, oh, that happened. To be fair, that applies to every game mode in Overwatch, but in competitive where that kind of stuff matters the most because you're trying to win, it's not really It's just unfair. With gameplay done, let's talk about the story and the lore of Overwatch. Now, in of itself, in general, Overwatch's lore is very peculiar. It's, how do I say it? The story in of itself is that it takes place approximately 2 years after Overwatch had disbanded, where Winston, after seeing how there might be a second Omnic crisis, which is when humanity and robots are in an all-out war and they're about to start fighting one another. Now Winston, the genetically engineered ape, who is very intellectual, decides to recall every Overwatch agent and bring back Overwatch in of itself to combat the second Omnic crisis. He gathers up all the old allies that he knows are both alive and are presumed dead, and tries to do his best to bring them back. Now the problem that I feel like the Overwatch campaign, or no, not campaign, the Overwatch story in of itself is like, it kind of feels incomplete at times. Now granted, they're still trying to create the story as the game goes on. Like the story is of Doomfist, Widowmaker, Reaper, Moira, Ana, like those different characters. They're all interesting. Like they have these incredible backstories that just develop them in a way that feels nice. And the interactions between each character in game feel genuine at times. And the comics are very well done. And the animated shorts offer cinematic a cinematic story. And at times it feels like the game isn't really complete. Now I'm not saying that people in solo and the people who want a single player campaign to get the story down. I don't really honestly need that kind of stuff. Personally, I don't think that that kind of story is necessary, but I definitely feel like the story of Overwatch just feels incomplete. Like, I honestly don't feel like we know so much about the story. We don't know a lot about the characters. Like, the characters in themselves, while they feel developed, they also feel like they just don't have any sort of reason to like want to root for them, like to want to at least care for them in a way. Their personality wise, they're great. The writing in this game is top notch. I enjoy it personally. And it's always enjoyable to see how the community in of itself try to create these little stories between each of the characters and just build the Overwatch game that a lot of people wanted. With like the interactions between each of the characters, like that kind of stuff. Now, granted, a lot of times there are a lot of times when they start to ship Overwatch characters with one another, which it's understandable because there's never going to be a time when there's not going to be a single ship between people in games and all that, so that's understandable. However, I feel like they're trying to do the devs job. They're trying to do the devs job. They're trying to do the devs job of creating the story for them, which feels nice, but at the same time, I would at least like to see more of the story. I would like to see more of Overwatch's lore. Like I would like to see it happen more often because it they don't feel like the story in of itself feels complete. Like it didn't feel complete when I first played the game. It doesn't feel complete now, which can be both a good thing and a bad thing. But honestly, for me, I would rather prefer having a full-fledged story being told. Like I rather prefer learning more about the story of Overwatch. I would like to hear more about talent, the talent side. I would like to hear more about the Omnic Crisis. I would like to hear more about the Junkyard. I would like to hear more of just the world that Overwatch has built. Like more than I've already seen. Now, granted, this might be a little bit selfish, but I'm a person who really likes hearing stories. I like knowing the stories of each game. Like I've become like this person who really likes hearing the stories. I would like to hear a lot about the side characters. I like to hear about all the different backstories. I like to hear more about that kind of stuff. And honestly, I feel like Overwatch has that same love for its story, but they just don't show it as much, which is I feel is, in my opinion, kind of a bad thing. Now that we're through with all the separate thoughts that I had of this game, I want to talk about what I now think of the game 1 year after it is released. Now, Overwatch and I share a weird history, a weird connection. It's the first game that I've ever played competitively, and it's the first game that has introduced me to another side of online gaming. And it's also and it's only the only game that has introduced me to the people who I call my friends and the people who I'm always grateful to have in my life. Like, this is the game that I've had so many things with. I've had tears, I've had laughter, I've had fun, I've had annoyance, I've had anger, hate. I've had all these different emotions come to play when I played this game. And in all honesty, this game is still a really fun game, but if I'm being completely honest, I no longer have that sort of passion that I had when I first played this game. Because I played this game primarily because the person who I used to watch the most on YouTube played it, and this was a fun game. This game has definitely changed me. The people who I play with have definitely changed me. They changed my perspective of life and all that. I'm a completely different person than I was when I first played this game, in a sense of like I'm still just Erik. I'm still always gonna be just Erik. Like, no matter what, that's never gonna change, but this game has at least shown me the side that I feel like I could have been without. And this game in of itself has given me more than I could have asked for, both in just the people who I am truly grateful for my friends, for my best friend Nala, for my friend Justin, who I've shared a lot of share with, both laughs, sadness, I guess. There's a lot of shit, and it also has helped build this little community that honestly I'm really happy for, because when I first started uploading videos to YouTube like a long time ago, I never honestly thought that people were going to be sub to me, and I never honestly thought that I would have viewers who would consistently watch my videos, who would consistently watch my streams. I never really had that in mind. But the fact is, a lot of people still watch me, and I was like, I appreciate a lot of you. And this game, like I said, I've had so many bad moments, I have so many good moments, but it's also given me so much stuff that I never honestly would have thought of. But it's honestly stuff that I couldn't be more happier to have. Like, I'm always gonna be Monkey D. Erik. That's always gonna be the part of me that's always gonna stick by, even if in the time when I stop playing this game. And I'm really happy I've gotten this game. This game, but in terms of gameplay, in terms of its competitive and all that, I definitely feel like the game has changed a lot. I feel like the community, the changed this game to the point where a lot of the characters feel completely different from when they first came out. Particularly Mercy and all that. Like, these are like the community in and of itself definitely caused a lot of uproar towards specific things. Like, if I'm being completely honest, like the community in and of itself is probably one of the more whiny communities out there, because they tend to like complain about certain things that the game doesn't really need. Like, they complain about Mercy, they complained about her ult, they then complained about her new ult being quote unquote overpowered, when it's really just the player's fault for not really trying to adapt. The problem being is like Overwatch and its communities, its developers and all that, because the Overwatch developers are trying to create a game that people can enjoy, that's accessible and all that, but at the same time, it's also causing a lot of uproar because a lot of the players are just complaining for the sake of complaining. Like, that instead of trying to adapt to the games, like a lot of adapt to the game and adapt to the characters and the heroes and their abilities,
like their changes, they prefer to have the developers then change it again just to satisfy their needs. Like, in all honesty, there are some changes that are very necessary, like Winston's shield timer starting immediately as he puts down the shield. Like, I feel like Zenyatta's health boost is definitely one of them. Like, a lot of them were kind of necessary, others weren't. Because they now are making the game less and less fun to play because, like, you have these moments where the game, where, like, the patches and the community just start criticizing for so many different things. And honestly, that's the issue I have a lot with Overwatch as well. Like I said before, I'll reiterate. I'm happy I've got this game. I won't regret ever buying it. If I ever had the chance to go back in time and actually and decide if I wanted to get this game, I would still do it 100%. I would not hesitate to buy it again. But this game ends up becoming more to a lot of people than they realize. And I honestly feel like the developers need to try to stop pleasing everybody in the community. And I feel like the community in of itself needs to learn to just stop asking for so many different changes, and they should try to learn to adapt to the situation. They should try to adapt. They should try to communicate more. Like, don't put it completely on the developers to just fix what you think is necessary to be fixed. If I had to give this game a rating purely based, like, if I'm being completely unbiased towards the community and all that, if it's a year ago, I would have said a 10 out of 10. This game would have been a 10 out of 10. Now, if I'm being completely honest, it would be either an 8.5 to a 9.2 out of 10. The game is still fun. It's very creative. It just has so many flaws that I've now come to see based on its fan base and just based on I don't like some of the characters. Just based on the devs. In all honesty, this is just one of those games that is just odd. Oh, I've managed to ramble on for almost 40 minutes. I honestly was not expecting it to go as long as 40 minutes, but hey, whatever. So, I'm going to end off the video. Thanks so much for listening, for everybody who decides to watch the 40 minutes of this game. I don't know how, but that's nice. So, I'm going to end off the video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next review, which will probably be soon. Talk to you all later.